Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to look at the Pioneer metagame on Magic Online. We're going to look at the most popular decks overall of 5-0 lists in leagues, of 4-0 lists in prelims, and top 32 lists in premier events, which there were two of this past week, the Pioneer Showcase Challenge and the normal Pioneer Challenge. And we're also going to be looking at those two premier events and the top 8 metagames, so the most successful decks of this past week, and see if we can draw any conclusions about that metagame moving forward. So this is the overall metagame over the course of the last week. At the very top, with 12.3% of the meta, it is blue-white control, which is kind of interesting because a few weeks ago, red-black midrange was totally dominating as far as overall popularity. Now, blue-white control is closely followed by green devotion, which is interesting because green devotion fell almost totally out of the meta a few weeks ago and now is seeing a large resurgence. And then in third is red-black midrange. Red-black midrange has been a staple at the top of the meta for a pretty long time. So let's look at these three decks. So blue-white control is exactly what it sounds like. It's removal spells, it is counter spells, it is draw spells, just like any blue-white control deck. Has some really efficient draw spells that you can block with, like Shark Typhoon. And then it will just control the board and take over the game with cards like Teferi, Hero Dominaria, and the Wandering Emperor. I think as Pioneer smooths out and the new popular decks sort of stop popping up, the last big innovation to Pioneer, I feel like, was the red-green boats deck. Control has found a stock list and found a spot that it can actually settle in with. The second most popular deck is Green Devotion. This is the deck we've looked at in length on this channel. The Green Devotion deck ramps things out with Nykthos, Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, and Wolfwillow Haven to get out large payoffs with large devotions for Nykthos, like Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns, being able to untap Nykthos with Kiora and either run people over with Storm the Festival into these Planeswalkers and into these really big creatures, or be able to toolbox with Karn and do infinite combos with different Pestilent Cauldron options. And the third most popular deck is red-black midrange. Again, similar to blue-white control, the deck's in the name. It is exactly what you'd expect. All of the creatures are either 2-for-1s or do things more than just be a creature. You have 1-for-1 removal spells that really culminate in Fable of the Mirror Breaker being able to do everything the deck ever wants to do. This deck has remained a staple at the top of the metagame for a very long time, in no small part to Misplaced Ginger, and will likely remain near the top. Probably will never be the best deck just because of the nature of the deck, but it is an extremely consistent 1-for-1 deck. The top 8 metagame looks a little different. At the very top of the top 8 metagame, with 25% of the top 8s this past weekend, was Lotus combo. The second most top 8s was the red-green boats or red-green aggro deck. And the third most top 8s, again, to circle back around, was red-black midrange. So two of those decks we haven't talked about yet. So Lotus combo is a combo deck based off of the land Lotus Field. You play the Lotus Field, which produces 3 mana, and then untap Lotus Field a whole bunch of times to be able to produce a ridiculous amount of mana. You run a bunch of tutors in your deck that you tutor out, where you eventually get so much mana that you're able to tutor out Approach to the Second Sun out of your sideboard, then tutor it out of your deck, and then just cast Approach to the Second Sun a second time and win the game. And red-green boats, which I've mentioned before in this video, is just a red-green aggro deck that is totally based around running copies of Asika's Chariot and Sky Sovereign, which is why they call it the boats deck. But it's red-green aggro. You know, it plays the ramp spells, the Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, Bone Crusher Giant, Lovestruck Beast, Reckless Stormseeker, and just is trying to kill our opponent as fast as possible. One of the new innovations of the deck is playing main deck the Akroan War, which is really sweet and interesting. And then we've already talked about red-black midrange. But there's more to this metagame than meets the eye. There are two different decks that won the premier events this past weekend. One was blue-white control, which we've already talked about. But the other one was green-white angels, which is slowly rising in popularity as time goes on. In fact, it barely missed in the overall meta. It barely missed being in the top 3. But Green-White Angels won one of the events this past weekend. And Green-White Angels is a kind of a cool deck. It's a collected company deck where it plays a bunch of cards to gain a ridiculous amount of life and then plays cards that capitalizes on gaining all of that life. It also plays Kayla's Reconstruction, which functions as a collected company as well. And it's just swarm the board with a ton of creatures, gain a ridiculous amount of life so that you just like never die and win. And this deck is becoming more and more popular as the weeks are wearing on, which is pretty exciting, seeing some fresh decks storming the metagame. Even though it's been around for a while, it's only recently becoming super popular. So that is the Pioneer meta for this week. If you want me to analyze the metagame in any other ways, any other data you want me to look at week to week, please let me know in the comments, or let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, then please like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.